Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello and welcome to this episode of our program. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and today we have with us Maura Sweeney, who is the Ambassador of Happiness. Maura, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mike. I'm really happy to be with you.
Hey, so Ambassador of Happiness, that sounds all official-like and wonderful and great. So how did you get that title? And, of course, what does it mean? Of course, we know happiness, but give us a little bit of background of the title and the moniker Ambassador of Happiness.
Well, thanks for asking. And knowing that you are speaking to an audience of entrepreneurs and business-minded marketing professionals, I tell you what I told everybody else. I made it up. My title, Ambassador of Happiness, was actually given to me, or I was named Ambassador of Happiness 2 summers ago by UNESCO Center for Peace when they invited me to come in and speak at the first ever Nelson Mandela Day celebration. And because they had a lot of dignitaries, they said, well, Maura, how do we identify you? And I thought, well, I write about happiness, I travel a lot, I speak publicly, and I inspire people to really become their biggest and best and happiest self and most authentic self from the inside out. And my focus, again, living happy inside out. So they said, well, we'll call you the Ambassador of Happiness. Now, here's the strange thing. Once they referred to me as that, other people who knew me said, Maura, we always called you an ambassador. And that is such a fitting name. And since then, I had one radio announcer tell me from out west, he said, Maura, I've interviewed everybody, but never the Ambassador of Happiness. He said, you need to trademark it. And so I ended up trademarking a moniker that really came out of an interest, a desire, and a manner in which I saw the world and world leadership from the time I was a young person. And so I literally made up the title Ambassador of Happiness, and now that's how I'm introduced even overseas and put in publications overseas, which is kind of interesting, isn't it, for anybody out there who's wondering how they turn themselves and their ideas into their own brand?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the concept of a self-fulfilling prophecy, in the sense that it was always latent there in you, in your background, in your ethos. But it took someone kind of, hinting around and then coming up with, and then at that point you started focusing more on that, and then that built from there. So I think that there's a lot to be said for speaking and saying and focusing on where we want to go, because then it's kind of like, that static cling. All of a sudden things start, attaching and clinging here, and then you start watching for opportunities, and then, the other aspect is a narrow focus. So are you the ambassador of, and then, 19 bullet points of other things? No, Ambassador of Happiness kind of keeps you focused on things, and that can be the Ambassador of Happiness in your, entrepreneur career, in your home-based business career, in your, corporate industry leadership. So it applies to so many things.
It does, and I really do encourage other people to stay true to their inner selves. And maybe this is a good time for me to offer something. Just yesterday, I released my most recent blog, and I do everything I do based on inspiration, but I called it, We Can All Be Creators of Culture. And I was reminded of my corporate career that I had several years ago for a while in the telecom industry. And I talked about all of a sudden as a young woman being just plucked out of a sales group, and I can't even say invited to be the sales manager. I didn't want the job, but I was told I had to have it. And I was in a remote sales office of the newly installed, telecom industry, which was growing at the time, and we had no brand identity. We had no advertising. We really had nothing to go on, and I felt like I was totally unprepared for the job. And yet, I used that as my opportunity to take a vacuum where we didn't have an identity, where we really didn't have a marketing presence, where I really didn't even know how to be a leader, and I used my internal I would say desires, and that was to find the best people, to train people well, to cultivate their talents, to celebrate them, and to create an environment where everyone could put forth their best and be celebrated for their best within a common culture. And the end result of the story was how together all of us ended up becoming the top office out of 34 offices throughout the United States. And all of it came from working from within and harmonizing and integrating a lot of our, let's say, internal desires and identities with an external goal. And that's really what I do. So whether it's with business people, whether it's people who are in government and looking to lead, young people who are in universities trying to figure out what their next thing is, or let's say people in their 30s, 40s, 50s saying, okay, I need to do something new. How do I figure it out? And I always invite people to go within and find out what their ethos is and find a way to marry that ethos up, maybe that important value they have or the things they really love. And I happen to love people, and I love developing people. So take what you love and what's important to you, and sometimes those things important to you may be your very challenges in life. But if you keep working at them, what you do and how you do it becomes synonymous. And then after a while, you become harmonized and integrated, and the marketplace and those around you see and recognize you for that very thing. And they're drawn to you, not just because of a product, not just because you have a title or company that you're working for, but they are literally drawn to the essence and the life within you of who you are. And I think it's a very powerful concept, and it's a concept that works for everyone universally.
Yeah, I love that entire approach, and while you were describing that, it made me think of a question. So when people hear look within and find yourself and all of those types of things, I would suspect that there's a lot of people that would say, I've looked all over and I can't find anything. I don't know what, so I confuse myself, that kind of a thing. And so how would you guide someone to some initial maybe thoughts or exercises or approaches to discovering some of the things that they're truly good at? And I know that the most common cliche ways are, if you could do anything you want and not worry about money, what would that be? Or, what are some of the things that you do that you're the most excited about that after you do it for hours and hours on end, you still, you're lost in time and those are the things you want to do. But sometimes those are things that cannot translate to supporting your family and you feel stuck in that position. But yet, if you did discover those inner qualities, that can translate to some external professional benefits as well. So how would you kind of guide in that thought process?
Okay, that's a whopper of a question all there because I have about 10 answers for you. But
okay.
It's great. And this is why I still love conversations like this. You're right. There are so many people that I think they're so confused. They're overworked. They're overstressed. They're like, who the heck am I and who do I want to be? Here's what I will tell people to do. Close their eyes whenever they're on their own, put their hand over their heart. And what that will do is move the attention and the focus away from the chattering mind, which oftentimes we become because we're always receiving outside impulses and messages. And usually when those messages are coming, they're coming from popular culture, popular media. But anyway, put your hand on your heart, close your eyes, and go back to childhood and just start surveying in your mind whatever you did before the world told you who you were or what you were going to be. And the moment you pause on a memory, and it could be a funny one that seems to bear no resemblance with what you're doing today, but the moment you start to smile, hold on to that because there's a thread inside there. I want to give you how that related back to me and what I'm doing. And in the course of it, I'll explain everything that you asked. When I was very young, I did not feel happy. In fact, I was a free-spirited person who wanted to travel the world, meet people around the world. I was taken up with things like the Mickey Mouse Club because I loved the way a group of young people and old people all worked together, played together, sang together, and went on adventures together. I love people being together and being in unity. I'm old enough to remember having JFK in the White House. I remember the day when our nation felt very proud and very expansive and very hopeful, and I loved positive, inclusive leadership that would say, ask not what your country could do for you, but instead ask what you could do for your country. And I also, even though I was brought up by my family with the expectation of being an attorney like my grandfather, I remember as a preschooler not being interested in what he did with practicing law, but instead watching his legal secretary type official legal documents up on a standard typewriter. As a young child, I looked and I thought, who is it, that's writing the written word that's going to be repeated and read by others? So what did that mean? People that would write books, would write columns, would be in the newspaper. Those were my interests as a little girl, not to mention having fun and being around friends. Well, here I am so many decades later after leaving law school, spending about a decade in corporate life and being in leadership there, being a homeschooling mom, helping my husband develop a business. I've taken everything I ever did, but all the interests I have, and I started writing. I started podcasting. I started speaking using all of my travel backgrounds. I've traveled probably to close to 60 countries. And my goal first and foremost, now this may not work for everyone, but maybe again it would. My goal was not to be the biggest blogger, the most popular this or the most popular that. My goal wasn't even I want to make money. We actually kind of left behind our corporate or our positions with a company that we had in order to do something that had meaning. What my goal was to become one of the most influential voices in the world, because I had a different vision for how our world could survive and thrive together under a different methodology of thought. And I knew that as I was faithful to what was important to me internally, and as I wrote about it, put it on video, started podcasting, going out to speak, that eventually people would pay me for what I am doing, and therefore the finances would follow my interests. So I was being true to myself, but I had a long-term plan. So all of that is really what it was. And in the process, I will tell you this, Mike, and maybe people need to hear it. When I was younger, I was a free spirit, but I was always chained to the house. I wanted to be out playing. My mother had me in the house at 4:30 in pajamas. I wanted to travel the world. My mother was afraid to go out the door. And I wanted to do something that involved people, and I was supposed to be an attorney. So I really grew up the opposite of much of what I wanted to do, but I used every one of those challenges to help push myself through barriers and to overcome mental baggage and who knows what else, including, let's say, even age baggage. I was over 50 years old when I decided I was going to be a public face as Maura for you. And so all of these things can translate to any listener today, young, old, rich, poor, so supposedly successful or not, frustrated, it doesn't matter. When you come up with things you love and you find ways to incorporate them, express them, and move them through wherever you are, you start to thrive from within. You show yourself as the gem that you are. You share your talents, and then others start to pick up on that atmosphere, and you find that you become abundantly happy and satisfied and an expert in your arena.
That's excellent, and that makes me think of the last question we'll wrap up with is, what advice can you give to listeners to start to develop their own influence and authority, whether or not they want to go the entrepreneurial route, but just elevating their influence and authority where they are right now?
Okay. Two things I would say to do. I have my own website, More For You, and I'm also on Huffington Post. But there is a blog that I put out a couple of months ago, and it was called Happiness Survey, 5 Things We Really Want. And I had done a national and international happiness survey. Do you know at bottom line what we want? Healthy relationships, peace of mind, freedom, purpose and fulfillment, and finally, personal confidence. This is universal to all of us. So I would say go to my website, or Huffington Post and look for 5 things we really want, happiness survey. But here's the other thing that I've used when I've spoken to others. You know, we may not all have the title of manager, president, CEO, but we can all be leaders by being people of influence. And so I have 4 little things I'll leave you and the listeners with. For the word lead, L-E-A-D. The first is look ahead. Most people only look at the here and now, and they look oftentimes at what do I need to survive right now? What do I need to protect myself? Rather than saying, what am I doing today that if I look back a year or 5 years or 10 years from now, I will be proud of and I won't have to run away from? And sometimes that means making tough decisions in the here and now that will help us and benefit us later and help us grow. The E in lead is everybody. Look at everybody in your wake. Don't just look at people above you or people you want to impress. Take in and absorb and appreciate everyone everywhere around you because it says everything about you. The A in lead is advance. Always be mindful of what you love. Advance a cause, a mission, or even an ideal. In my case, it's encouraging people to find their best talents and emerge into their best self. And D, misspelling, L-E-A-D, is be destiny-minded. Be destiny-minded with everything you do. Think about the destiny you want to pursue in your own life and a legacy you want to leave behind. And I would think that's powerful advice. It's the kind of advice I've learned to live by myself and that I inspire and encourage others to do, because if they do, they will leave behind a far better world than the one we're in right now.
And make a difference all along the way, not just when you finally reach something at the end.
Right. Most of us are always living for the future, and we hardly realize that wherever we are, even if it seems like it's a tough spot, we can so change our lives. We can change our thoughts. We can use the moment to grow through, overcome challenges, use it as an opportunity to express our values. There's so many ways that the here and now is helping us to become the bigger, better, and brighter self that we are all longing to be.
And what is the best place that listeners can learn more about your writings, your blogs, and your books?
Okay. Well, I think I've referenced, too, that I'm also a podcaster. The easiest way to find me is to go to my website. It's my first name, Maura, M as in Mary, A-U-R-A, followed by 4, the number, and U, the letter, Maura4you.com, because I'm always for you. And if they happen to like podcasts, I'm on iTunes and Stitcher as Maura Sweeney, Living Happy Inside Out. And if they like Huffington Post, they could look for Maura Sweeney there as well. So thank you for allowing me to share all this, and I really do hope people do tune in, read me, whatever, because I will be everyone's best coach for their best life from the inside out.
Excellent. Well, Maura, thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful getting to know you.
You as well. Thank you for having me, and best wishes not only to you but to everyone who tunes in and listens to you each week.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.